Hi, I'm Victoria, and today's topic on Listen Up Homebuyers is exclusive buyer agency. What is it? And what should every homebuyer know about it? My guest is attorney Rich Rosa, the co founder and co owner of Buyers Brokers Only, an exclusive buyer agent real estate firm with offices throughout the greater Boston area, southern New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. Rich Rosa is the president of the National Association of Exclusive Buyer Agents. NABA is a nonprofit organization made up of real estate brokerages who only represent homebuyers. Rich, it is a real pleasure having you on the podcast.
It's nice to see you, Victoria, and thank you for having me on again.
Absolutely. Okay, Rich, let's jump right in. Would you provide a brief overview of how the real estate system works?
Well, from the broad perspective, there's buyers and there's sellers, and sellers typically hire real estate agents known as listing agents to sell their home. They pay those listing agents a commission to do that, and there are also agents that represent buyers, and a home buyer who's looking for a home could hire a buyer's agent. Now, there's different types of buyer's agents, but that's generally speaking how real estate works. Buyers, sellers, listing agents, buyer agents.
Okay. Um, That's a great overview. And now we're going to kind of break all of that down. Talk to me first about what I would call the big box real estate brokerages, the ones that you see all across the country. How do they function in that scenario?
Well, typically the larger traditional real estate firms around the country, they're really focused on getting listings, and they will have agents that represent both buyers and sellers. It's something called dual agency, where the brokerage is representing through either one agent or two agents, both the seller, the homeowner, and the buyer, the home buyer, in the same transaction.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Yeah. And there are other names for that kind of representation. I know in the state of Maryland, it's called designated agency. And that's when
Correct. Yeah.
they'll have that listing. And again, it's with the brokerage. So I always think of like an umbrella, and you've got this umbrella, and underneath you've got buyer agents and listing agents. This is in the big box real estate firms. And so if you sign up and purchase a home with, or a home that is listed by that brokerage, then you would have to agree to a designated agency relationship.
And that's the same way in Massachusetts
Hmm.
as well. You know, when one agent represents both the buyer and the seller, it's pretty clearly dual agency.
Right.
Um, Even when one agent in the same firm, or two agents in the same firm, I should say, represent the buyer and the seller, that's also dual agency. But some states, like you've mentioned, Massachusetts being one of them, Maryland being another, they've sort of changed the rules and they've called them designated buyer agents. So
Hmm.
the broker is designating one agent to represent the seller and another agent to represent the buyer. Um, Not really avoiding the conflict of interest that arises when one company is representing both parties in a real estate transaction.
And I want to get more into what you just mentioned there. Tell me, what is a buyer's agent?
Well, a buyer's agent is someone that represents a home buyer uh, to, to purchase a home.
Hmm.
Now, as you mentioned, there are, what are called designated buyer agents, and states have different terms
Hmm.
for these buyer agents.
That's true.
Um, and but the traditional type of buyer agent works at a company that represents both buyers and sellers.
Hmm.
And if you work with one of those agents, you could be in a situation where you're buying a home where that agent's company is also representing the seller.
Hmm.
Now, there are exclusive buyer agents.
Hmm.
Those agents only represent home buyers, and they work at companies that do not represent sellers. So therefore, they avoid that potential conflict of interest that could arise if you're looking at a house where someone in the same company is representing the seller.
Mhm.
That won't happen with the exclusive buyer agent because they don't represent sellers.
That's right. Yeah. A couple of things I want to mention. In some states, dual agency is outlawed. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind since this is going to be a national broadcast. And it's also important for people to know, in full transparency, that Rich and I are exclusive buyer brokers, meaning that our brokerages don't take any listings and we never work for sellers. So can you talk a little bit, Rich, about the there? Let's see. Hold on.
Well, while there are states that make dual agency legal, they do provide an ability for brokerages to receive both sides of the commission,
Mhm.
and that's what this is all about, right? I mean,
Mhm.
real estate firms want to get not just one side of the commission, but both sides of the commission. Because,
Mhm.
like I said earlier, sellers will hire a listing agent who will then list the property for sale, and they'll offer that listing agent, or they'll agree with that to the terms of a commission with that listing agent, and
Right.
often that commission is split with a buyer agent, or there is some sort of split, some sort of cooperating commission that's being offered to that buyer agent. And
Mhm.
so if a brokerage could have both the buyer agent and the selling agent representing both parties, then they'll get both sides of the commission. And
Mhm.
obviously, that's lucrative for them, maybe not really great for the buyer or the seller for that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. And talk to me a little bit about why that might not be the best choice for a consumer, a home buyer who's coming out there and wants to make sure that they are fully represented in the transaction.
Well, the example I give to my clients is simply this: if um, I were a lawyer,
Which you are.
and yeah, which I am, and my law partner was Victoria, you, and the seller came to you and said, "I'm selling my house. Would you represent me, Victoria?"
Mhm.
And the person who's buying that house came to me and said, "Would you represent me, Rich? I'm buying a house." If you represented the seller and I represented the buyer, there's a pretty good chance we'd be disbarred.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that's a big no-no
In law.
for lawyers to
Yeah.
represent opposing parties.
Mhm.
Um, that happens every day in real estate,
Yeah.
uh, in real
Yeah.
estate firms.
Mhm.
Um, so, and the reason why lawyers can't do it is because of the conflict of interest.
Mhm. That's
Um,
right.
and so it's the same thing that happens in a real estate brokerage.
Mhm.
That there's the potential there for conflict of interest.
Mhm.
And so why, to answer your question, why is it not a good idea? Because you want to avoid conflicts of interest that could
Mhm.
come up,
Mhm.
and that could you know hurt your ability to negotiate, hurt your ability to get all the information you need to make an informed decision. Um, and all sorts of other things that may come up that because of that conflict.
Yeah. And I want to drill down a little bit more on all of those things because I think, again, if we're talking about first time home buyers, you don't know what you don't know. And many times we end up getting people coming to our brokerage because something has happened in a past transaction that has made them just really uncomfortable with moving ahead unless they have, the kind of representation where it's not compromised.
Sometimes it's a question of, are you being provided with all the details? For example, if you go directly to a listing agent, I
Hmm.
mean, they have no obligation to you as a buyer. Their obligation is to the seller. Their
Hmm.
obligation is to get the highest price and the best terms for that seller.
Hmm.
Anything you tell that agent, they have no obligation to keep it confidential. In fact, if they could use it to negotiate against you, then that's what they'll do, and that's what they should do for the seller. When you don't have your own agent, and like you said, it's you don't know what you don't know,
Hmm.
then you don't know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, an experienced agent's been through this either dozens or hundreds or maybe even thousands of times,
Right.
and they're prepared to ask questions and to look out for their buyers.
Hmm.
And so if you don't, have that representation, then you don't know what to ask.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. And that brings me to a question about attending open houses. A lot of people like to go to open houses, and I want to point out something that you just said. It's a really important thing to remember, that person who is at the open house, even if they're not the listing agent, which many times they are not the listing agent, sometimes it's somebody on their team, but that person is there representing the seller. What would you advise people when they're going to an open house?
I advise them that it's okay to ask some questions about the house,
Hmm.
but there's absolutely no reason to tell the listing agent anything personal about their circumstances.
Hmm.
And if they have an agent and they're going to an open house, then they should just simply say to the listing agent or the agent at the house, if they're asked questions, well, I have I have an agent,
Hmm.
and I'll have my agent, reach out to you about, this, that, or the other thing. But I think that it's important to just be careful what you say.
Hmm.
And in this market, where it's certainly a seller's market right now,
Hmm.
it's not just something you might say that would hurt you negotiate in your negotiations, but it might be something that you say that, you know, leads the agent to think, oh, well, we don't want this person to buy the house,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true.
so you've really got to be careful what you say. Again, there's nothing wrong with asking questions. How old's the roof?
Hmm. Yeah.
Things like that. But
Basics. Yeah.
basics, but not, getting into a conversation about your personal life and why you like the house and
Hmm.
why you want to move to this neighborhood. None of that's going to benefit you.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think that if they're friendly with the listing agent at the open house, somehow
Hmm.
that's going to help them when they make an offer in a multiple offer situation. But
Right.
when that agent gets 12 offers, they don't remember who they talked to at an open
Yeah.
house,
Yeah.
because they probably talked to 25 people, if not
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, no, it's true. And again, to reiterate the point, most of the information that they're gleaning from that conversation is anything that they can use to benefit their client, the seller. Um, Talk to me a little bit about the responsibilities of a buyer's agent, or I should say, an exclusive buyer's agent, with respect to being a fiduciary.
So, I mean, what that essentially means, and it's a term that's often used in the financial industry,
Hmm.
uh, with financial planners and things like that. But the bottom line is that person is, obedient to you, the home buyer, is loyal to you. The home buyer has a duty to disclose
Hmm.
to the home buyer. So there's a number of things that being a fiduciary means. And
Hmm.
but the bottom line is that person is 100% loyal to you, the home
Hmm.
buyer, and no
Hmm.
one else.
If a buyer is working with someone who is listing a property, for example, in the brokerage, and they happen to be working with somebody who's a buyer's agent there, I know from just having friends in the business that frequently there'll be bonuses for people to collaborate and sell one of the brokerage's properties, and that, of course, is not something that a lot of people know about. But you don't want an agent who's going to be getting a bonus to sell you one particular house over another house, because there you go with a conflict of interest.
Absolutely. And that does happen in some firms where there's an incentive to sell the firm's listings. The brokerage wants to have both sides of the commission. So if
Hmm.
they could get both sides of the commission, they're happy to pay a bonus to that buyer agent. It's well worth it to them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What's your opinion on someone who says, hey, I want to work with my friend, and they work for a traditional real estate brokerage that has listings to sell, and I'd like to purchase a property?
Well, there's nothing wrong with working with a friend, except that in that case, you have the same situation that you'd have if you're not working with a friend, which is they're working for a traditional real estate brokerage that also takes listings. And if your friend shows you a listing that is uh, where the listing agent works at the same company as he or she does, then all the same conflicts of interest arise, whether it's a friend or it's not a friend.
Yeah.
So, that's the issue there.
Yeah. It's a very important point.
I think it's important for buyers to do their research, talk to buyer agents, get a feel for. I always tell people, you're going to potentially spend a lot of time with this person. So, find someone who's going to be patient, willing to answer your questions, look out for you, someone who's not going to be afraid to tell you, don't buy this house. And someone who you like because you're going to spend time with them.
Rich Rosa is the president of the National Association of Exclusive Buyer Agents. Rich, thank you so much for joining me on Listen Up Homebuyers. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Victoria, for having me.